Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros, the football podcast. I am Chris Welsh. That is Pat Fitzmaurice. We got Scott Pianowski in the house. This is Week 7 wide receiver ranks. We are going through all the top dogs in the wide receiver realm. If you guys are looking for more ranks on your wide receivers or any other position, go to fantasypros.com/rankings. Follow them throughout the week, and you can see how they shuffle up and down as we get healthy tags and questionable tags on players. Stay up to the minute on it with the Fantasy Pros ranks. You can also check that out over on my playbook. Gentlemen, let's do some wide receiver ranks here. We've got the top 12. Here's the big board for the week. Justin Jefferson is the number 1 wide receiver, followed by Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Malik Neighbors, assuming he is back, which looks like we are good to go. Top 5, Chris Godwin, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Jaden Reed, Deontay Johnson, Stephon Diggs, and Terry McLaurin. That's a relatively chalky top 12, except Terry McLaurin jumping in here. Let's start with him. Obviously, these are all startable players, so we're not going to go nuts. But Terry McLaurin, ECR 12. Fitz, you've got him outside. But Scott, hello. Terry McLaurin, you've got at 6. So, Mr. Pianowski, let's hear it. A top 6 wide receiver for the Commanders in Terry McLaurin this week. Sell us on it. Or just, give us info.
Yeah, I mean, 4 touchdowns in 4 games. Jaden Daniels has hit the ground running. The schedule does get tougher after this week, but it doesn't get tough in week 7. Carolina is about as good of a matchup you can have right now for an opposing defense. So a locked in wide receiver 1 on an offense I trust. It is just so nice that apparently Terry McLaurin isn't going to have the Allen Robinson career path where he just plays with sketchy quarterbacks his whole life. And then we just absolve him of blame and blame everybody throwing him the football. I just pray they can keep Jaden Daniels healthy because this has such an RG3 feeling. Hope is back in Washington. It's a very stealable division. I think Washington sails past 30 points in this game. I think McLaurin's in the end zone again.
Pat, not like you don't like him. You just have him at 13, I believe. So you got him right outside. He's like the number 1 wide receiver 2 for you. The only thing you would love to see is you'd kind of love to see Jaden treat Terry like Lamar treats Zay Flowers. Like, please give him 12 targets every single game and let's get him a lot more catches. McLaurin has definitely made, his dinner with a big play every single game, and the touchdowns have saved a little bit. Is that what's keeping you off of going really high? Because I agree with Scott. Like what Jaden Daniels is doing is like top end, and you take top end quarterbacks with a top end wide receiver, their number 1 target, and you want to play him high. It's just, it doesn't feel like we've had this mass volume with McLaurin. So is that what's maybe keeping him off of just like a no doubt number 1 for you, Pat?
Yeah, correct, Welsh. And I love Terry McLaurin, one of my most rostered players this season. And to echo Scott's sentiment, it is so nice that he finally gets to play with a good quarterback, because probably the best quarterback he had played with before this year was late career Alex Smith. It was just a litany of, bad quarterbacks for him in the last few years. The reason I don't consider him a slam dunk wide receiver 1 is just that McLaurin doesn't get that high volume. He's averaging 7.2 targets a game. He's only had double-digit targets once this season. So the yardage floor not as sturdy for McLaurin as it is for some of the other top receivers. He's had 200-yard games this year, but he's been below 55 yards in the other 4.
Yeah, and it makes sense. There's an interesting little element I want to throw into this. Cooper Kupp, because, Pat, your version of Terry McLaurin this week is Cooper Kupp. Kupp is kind of all over the board here. He had an ECR of 9 a week ago. It looks like he is not even on this right now, unless I am just blind. Yeah, I don't even see him right now, but it looks like he was in practice here on Wednesday, and it looks like he's getting out there. It looks viable that he is going to start, but no one really knows what to do with him. So, Fitz, you've got him at 6. Scott's got him at 17. 6, obviously, is he's healthy, but you think he's active. We are back to normal Cooper Kupp, no limitations, no limit soldier Cooper Kupp is, and you just roll with it at 6.
If he comes off the high ankle sprain and does indeed play with Puka Nacua not ready to come back for a few more weeks, I just think he goes back to having one of the highest target floors of anyone in the game. Like probably 12 targets would be the floor if he is like clearly the lead wide receiver for the Rams this week against a Raiders defense that, we're certainly not afraid of.
By the way, I found him on there. It was 23. So he had moved from 9 in the first early set of rankers. So just behind the scenes, it looks like the first people that started to put in ranks were starting to rank him like he is going to play. So he had a 9 spot. Then when you had more volume of rankers coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, he's moved down to 23 because everyone just wants a confirmation on it. So that's where he's at. So Scott, you're kind of in the middle. You're middle between where Pat is at and where the rankers are putting him right now. That looks like there's a little bit of pessimism. Is 17 relative to, is like a placeholder while he's not healthy, or 17 like, hey, listen, it's an ankle sprain. He's active, but we might see more limitations than what we've seen with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I'm taking heart in the fact that I think Sean McVay is pretty forthcoming with this type of stuff. Jordan Rodriguez also is an outstanding Rams beat writer. So between whatever Sean says and whatever Jordan reports, I think we'll have a good sense of this situation by the end of the practice week on Friday. And hopefully we can fold that into a decent decision on Sunday. I think you'd have to have a really strong wide receiver room to not play Kupp this week because, as Pat said, I mean, look at the players behind him. I mean, they're getting some mileage out of Wingington here and there. Atwell seems to make one big play a week. Parkinson was actively targeted the last time the Rams played. But as soon as Kupp's back on the field, especially with Nakua not being available, you get to figure like 8 to 10 targets are in his back pocket. And it wasn't that long ago that he was getting, 527 targets at Detroit. We know McVay loves to cook up Cooper Kupp and get him wide open in their scheme. So I want to write out the practice week. That's going to dictate probably how I finally rank Kupp when it's the end of the week. But I feel confident that we'll get news that informs us and lets us make a good decision.
If he's active, Kupp or McLaurin, Scott?
I have to play McLaurin because I know he's healthy, and I wish they'd pepper him with targets. They probably won't do that, but the player in fine form who's 100% healthy is always going to be the preference to me.
There you go. When it's time for tickets to your favorite event, it's game time. So many ways to save money on tickets, no matter when you buy with Game Time. Game Time Picks shows you only the best values on tickets, last minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. And even an hour after it starts, you can get exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They've even got zone deals where you can pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big savings. Game Time, your number one app if you are looking to get to live events. And you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FantasyPros for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem FAN. This is redeem code FANTASYPROS. That's FantasyPros for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's also time for wide receivers 13 through 24. So these are our wide receiver twos for the week. Mike Evans comes in as the top dog as far as 13 goes versus Baltimore this week. We've got Zay Flowers, Deebo Samuel coming in above Brandon Ayuk. Garrett Wilson, Davante Smith, Brandon Ayuk. We've got T. Higgins, Tyreek Hill at 20, Brian Thomas, Jamison Williams, as I mentioned, Cooper Kupp at 23, and Jordan Addison. Let's talk about Garrett Wilson. And let's also turn it into Davante Adams conversation. Garrett Wilson comes in that's actually 16. He was 17. He actually moved up a notch after the trade. The trade happened early on Tuesday. By Tuesday night, he moved up one little notch here. So we've got Scott, you've got him at 16. Fitz, you've got him at 18. Fitz, let's start with you. Garrett Wilson with Davante Adams, because apparently Davante Adams is going to make his debut this week. So what do you think is taken away or added to Garrett Wilson? And then also, where do you have Davante Adams in this?
Yeah, so I had initially ranked Garrett Wilson 15 after the trade. I dropped him a little bit to wide receiver 18, and I've got Davante Adams at wide receiver 33. I'm worried 33 might be too low for Adams, but I can't just imagine Adams walking right in and getting 10 targets right off the bat. So
it is Rodgers.
It is Rodgers, but he has been building a little bit of a rapport though with Garrett Wilson in recent weeks, and this is like kind of a kick in the teeth if you're a Garrett Wilson investor, just as he was becoming this target monster. 33 targets, 21 catches, 208 yards, and 2 touchdowns in his last 2 games. And just as that's happening, in comes Davante Adams. So that's tough. But like, I still think we have to consider Wilson like a mid-range to low-end wide receiver 2 going forward, because he's just too good to disappear. Like, Davante Adams is not going to get rid of him. I think it's going to be 1A and 1B going forward for the Jets. Lazard is the guy who suffers now. Lazard is the guy who's, probably not playable henceforth.
I'm very pro Garrett Wilson, and we were talking a lot about this earlier in the week too, of the chaos of people freaking out about what this could end up looking like. And that I think this is a good buy of Garrett Wilson if people are freaking out. And I think this is appropriate, this rank range. But Scott, what say you? You've got Garrett Wilson even a little bit higher. You've got him at 16. So that ends up being right where he is at ECR. What are your thoughts on Garrett Wilson with Davante Adams? And then how are you ranking Davante Adams this week?
Yeah, this is the poor man's A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Where there's a Batman and a Robin, I still think the Batman is Garrett Wilson because he's a lot younger and maybe more elusive. But obviously the back class and rapport of Adams and Rodgers will have to be respected. But I still think I view Wilson as like a locked-in wide receiver 2 every week. He's not going – you just have to accept that you're not going to get – how you drafted him last year, and this year you thought, okay, Garrett Wilson, the moon, he's not going to get to the moon, but he's going to get somewhere up in the sky where he can't be located by radar. I still feel like he'll be the last 2 weeks we can build on that. The gorgeous touchdown catch that everybody saw except the official standing, 1 foot away, called him out of bounds. And originally, I don't know how that happens, but I actually think it'd be a good time to maybe look into a Garrett Wilson trade, take the temperature of his manager. Adams is to me the harder player to rank because he's 32. I mean, it's just in an age where we don't know what to do with receivers a lot. He doesn't have the same separation. His wins often in Green Bay were just leverage wins, right? Did that back shoulder throw that him and Rodgers were so good at. And who was Rodgers at this point of his career too? I thought he looked pretty good Monday night, but he's not the same MVP player that we saw. So I think a locked in wide receiver 2 for Wilson going forward. And I think Adams is on the periphery of that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. If you're a manager for Adams, you're glad he got traded, but I think you have to realize he's still dealing with a capped upside. Let
me really quickly do who would you rather? Who would you rather? I'll ask you guys both these, and we'll just do quick hitters. Would you rather Davante Adams or JuJu Smith-Schuster? We'll start with you, Scott.
I can't believe I'm saying JuJu, but then they were pressing the easy button for him 2 weeks ago. I can't unsee that.
Fitz?
Same. JuJu.
Oh, you guys are sickos. Would you rather Davante Adams or Josh Downs? We'll start with you, Fitz.
I'll go Adams.
Okay. So
it has to be Adams because they're going to play Anthony Richardson again. Did you know, by the way, Joe Flacco has multiple touchdown passes in his last 8 games. One of them wasn't even a start.
I wish we could see Flacco every single week. All right. So I think we found the sicko range. It's Davante Adams between Josh Downs and JuJu Smith-Schuster. Like everybody wrote it up at the beginning of the year.
Let me throw one more out there. I'll throw this one to Fitz. Would you rather have Davante Adams or Darnell Mooney?
It's a good one.
Well, that is a really good one. I think I have Adams just a smidge higher in my rest of season rankings, but I don't feel confident in that call at all. It's really close.
I just did rest of season rankings, and I think I have Adams higher. I'm not sure about that. I love that Mooney never leaves the field. It's a pretty concentrated offense. It's I could see whatever the dear listener feels about this, I can think you could be justified. Adams is going to the Hall of Fame. Darnell Mooney's not going into the Hall of Fame. So maybe they'll rekindle something in New York. But the floor play, it sounds so scary to say this, the floor play is Mooney.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It is kind of the floor play. You know what the targets are going to be. There's a mystery with Davante Adams right now. A guy that, a couple more weeks, this could have been a bigger question, or at the beginning of the year, there wasn't a question of Davante Adams versus Brian Thomas. We're not going to do a Adams versus Thomas, but I'm kind of screaming. I love Brian Thomas, and he's coming off of his worst game. Evan Ingram comes back in and takes a lot of target share in here, but I think it's another great time to buy while people are kind of like jilted on that. He comes in as wide receiver 21 this week. And Scott, you've got him at 20. Fitz, you got him at 23. So we're general range. So this is just kind of a check back up on coming off of that bad game and Ingram coming in. Is there any fear that has set in? This is, I think, still relatively appropriate range of the guy that can be a strong wide receiver too. Scott, your take on Ingram potentially taking away anything from Brian Thomas, which we already saw in one game, but moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Ingram gets double-digit targets, catches all of them. Other than the fumble loss, it was a beautiful game for him. But Thomas is such a winner, intermediate and downfield. Unfortunately, he's got Doug Peterson calling the plays and Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball, and that isn't a lot of fun. Maybe the Patriots will help them out a little bit, although they do have one really good corner. I just want to bet on talent. We also often see rookie receivers have a spike when they get their feet wet a little bit around this time of year, and Thomas came out of the shoots playing really well. So I'm going to bet on talent. I'm going to close my eyes to the coaching and the quarterback play, and I'm going to rank Thomas and start Thomas proactively.
Until truly proven otherwise, not just one game. Fitz, same thing. Brian Thomas, your level of comfort of being able to start him. You got him over some big names. I mean, we just talked about Mooney, Tank Dell, like he's ranked higher than that. But what say you on Brian Thomas for this week?
Yeah, unless it's like a 10-team league where you only have to start 2 receivers every week, I think he's pretty much a slam dunk start. But I do feel like the ranking for him is sort of like not factoring in the Evan Ingram variable. And like Brian Thomas Jr. is too good to be marginalized by Evan Ingram. But incrementally, yeah, I do think Ingram's going to put a little bit of a dent in Brian Thomas's fantasy value.
My hope is it would come from Christian Kirk, but it's a possibility, but it's one I'm willing to bet across. One more in the wide receiver 2 range, Jordan Addison, who comes in as wide receiver 24 here. You guys both do not have him as a wide receiver 2. More so, Fitz, you almost don't have him as a wide receiver 3 this week. You've got him at 34. Scott has him at 27. So, Fitz, let's hear from you on Jordan Addison's lower rank.
I really like the player. I just can't rate him as a wide receiver 2 when he is the second fiddle to Justin Jefferson. And there's a chance TJ Hawkinson comes back this week. Like only 3 games for Addison so far, but he hasn't had more than 3 receptions in any game. So I just don't see him as a wide receiver 2 candidate this week.
Scott, same thing on Addison.
I think he needs a touchdown. He's not going to have the volume, right? There are different pieces here. Sam Darnold was a great story, but I think he's a good player. I don't think he's going to be like this MVP candidate. It's easy to say regression, just leave the room, drop the mic. But I think Addison's going to have to do it with 5 to 8 targets, a lot of games. If you don't get the touchdown, he's going to come in under his projection.
All right, folks, it's time for our Scott's second half Sprouts segment where we highlight one young player who we'll call a seed who's ready to sprout or break out and help your fantasy team dominate down the stretch. Mr. Pat Fitzmaurice, who is the second half sprout?
This week, Welsh, the seed who's ready to sprout is Xavier Legette, the final pick of the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. Legette's role is increasing. He had a touchdown catch in 2 of the Panthers' last 3 games, and he's played more than 75% of the offensive snaps in 2 of his last 3 games. He had this unusual production profile at South Carolina, did nothing for his first 4 years. Then as a 5th-year senior, explodes for over 1,200 yards. That profile made me kind of wary of him in dynasty rookie drafts, certainly. But man, like Legette is growing on me. This guy is big and fast and dangerous after the catch. Xavier Legette is the seed who is ready to sprout.
Just like your fantasy team, your lawn needs the right care to thrive, especially during the fall. Bet you didn't know that fall is the perfect time to feed your lawn. Give your lawn a boost with Scott's Turf Builder Winter Guard. Recover from summer, prep for winter, and lay the foundation for a strong, healthy lawn come spring. Scott's Winter Guard strengthens your grass's roots, repairs summer damage, and prepares your lawn for winter so you can enjoy your fall without worrying about your yard. So don't wait. Pick up a bag of Scott's Turf Builder Winter Guard today. Feed your lawn. Feed it. Wide receivers 25 through 36 time. These are your wide receiver 3/flex if you play in a 2 wide receiver league. Darnell Mooney comes in at 25, who we talked about. Tank Dell at 26. Amari Cooper, who's now traded to Buffalo. Jackson Smith in Jigba, if I can say that. JuJu Smith-Schuster. There's 2 good names back to back. Ladd McConkey, Romeo Doubs, George Pickens, Josh Downs, Christian Kirk, Xavier Worthy, and Demario Douglas rounds out the 36. So let's talk about the other traded wide receiver in Amari Cooper, who comes in at 27. He was 25 a couple days ago. Scott, you got him at 28. Fitz, you got him at 27. This is like a no doubt boost, him going to Buffalo. I feel like this rank is maybe a little bit more contingent on like, all right, it's a short, what can he be used in for this first week? But Scott, you tell me otherwise. I think this is huge for Amari Cooper, who was one of a couple of the unheralded, like huge underlying stat guys, unearthed stats, if you will, in Cleveland, and now he's going to go to Buffalo, where it feels like he can realize a lot of those unrealized gains. Is what I'm looking for. So, Amari Cooper on this rank this week. Is this about limited usage because of the trade, or is this your feel for him in Buffalo?
It's more the first thing. You think, okay, what might it be like if Amari Cooper were traded in the middle of the season? It's already happened before. He was traded off the Oakland sinking ship, not to be confused with the Las Vegas Raiders sinking ship we see this year, back in, 2018? And then he goes to Dallas. He starts scoring touchdowns again. All of his efficiency numbers go up. So Cooper's a quick study. Buffalo has a need here, right? It's not like Buffalo added him. The Jets wanted to add Adams. The Bills needed to add Cooper. I think it's maybe a more impactful move, even if Cooper isn't quite the player Adams is, although it's pretty close. They're both. I think Adams is already in the Hall of Fame. I think Cooper's probably going to fall short unless he has maybe one or two more acts in his career, seasons of note. But because he did so well in that change to Dallas, and because there's so much urgency in Buffalo to get him up to speed, I think he's a really sound player going forward. This week I had to be a little bit tempered in his ranking. I'm prepared to ranking 5 or 6 slots higher going forward.
Yeah, and Pat, the word I was looking for was that unrealized gains. There's a couple of those guys. Cortland Sutton, air yard monster, nothing happens. George Pickens was a top 10 in air yards, and now you get Russell Wilson, unrealized gains. Amari Cooper is another one of those players, and now you go and play in Buffalo. So the same thing applies here. Is this like, we're probably going to have some limitations. We don't know what it's going to look like, and he will be higher in rank and weeks moving forward? Or is there a timidness maybe with some of the weapons they have there and going higher on Cooper?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You and Scott said it well. I'm going to have him in wide receiver 2 range most weeks, but I don't think he's walking right into 12 to 15 targets. And the Titans have actually been a pretty tough matchup for wide receivers. I think they've given up the second fewest fantasy points. L'Jarius Sneed, fantastic cornerback, and Jarvis Brownlee has been playing pretty well on the other side in place of Chidobe Awuzie. So not a great matchup. But yeah, I mean, Scott mentioned it before, as we saw earlier, like we had Amari Cooper get traded in season, also happened in the run up to week 7 back in 2018. And Cooper did step right in and have 5 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown right after the trade. So maybe we get a repeat of that.
You imagine how good the Tennessee defense would be if they weren't sold down the river by Will Levis every week.
I mean, another unrealized potential. 8 targets for 0 catches. That's hard to do. Shout out to you, Calvin Ridley. You sickos talked about JuJu Smith-Schuster. JuJu Smith-Schuster is 29 in ECR. He was 27, so he's moved down just a notch. You guys are both pretty heavily over consensus. And Scott, you've got him as a wide receiver too, JuJu. So I know you did kind of talk about him just a tiny bit in the Davante Adams conversation, but what else would you like to add as your wide receiver 23 for the week?
I mean, if you had to bet on who would get the most targets in Kansas City this week, I think JuJu's a reasonable bet. You could also go with Kelsey, but it's Andy Reid. He's putting on his pajamas. He's sitting on the couch. He's eating mac and cheese. He's just going with comfort food in this offense, and JuJu's a part of that. We saw it 2 weeks ago. It was an easy button they kept pressing. Is
there a better comfort food, by the way, than mac and cheese? Is that like that's tier 1?
No. Tier 1.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else in the tier. It's like mac and cheese, and then it's the other stuff. Like you could maybe put like a grilled cheese sandwich. Cheese is involved in comfort.
Cheese to the rescue. I mean, Pat can speak to cheese more than I can as a Wisconsin guy, but yes, cheese to the rescue. Cheese, incredible cheese.
So Pat, cheese or JuJu, whichever you would like to talk about. I'll give it to you.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about cheese all day, but we'll go with JuJu here. Like he is playing the Rashee Rice role now, and the funny thing is, Rashee Rice came in and took over JuJu's role in 2023 and proved to be like this fabulous upgrade over JuJu. But we should remember that back in 2022, JuJu had 78 catches for 933 yards playing this role. So I think that's a pretty good indicator of what he's going to be the rest of the way. And maybe he gives us 60% to 70% of what Rashee Rice was giving us. That's still actually pretty valuable in fantasy. And I would much rather have JuJu going forward than Xavier Worthy.
And he's probably going to get littered with targets. And you know what? We've also seen some slot receivers. Tutu Atwell beat up on the 49ers. So that's another thing to watch for, that JuJu will probably be able to move around and play pretty well against them. Demario Douglas, Pop, is wide receiver 36. Fitz, you've got him at 42. Scott, you've got him at 32. Fitz, why do you hate Pop Douglas, besides him being a Patriot?
don't hate him, but maybe Douglas does turn into a semi-reliable possession receiver, high volume possession receiver for Drake May. But I don't know if I want to count on volume to carry the day when we're talking about a rookie quarterback playing with a pretty bad offensive line. Like May had his moments last week and the numbers wound up being pretty good, but the first 4 or 5 possessions, Scott's a Patriots fan. He can attest that it was a bumpy start for Drake May last week. Douglas played his 20th NFL game last week and scored his first NFL touchdown. So not a big touchdown score, not a big play guy. He needs volume to get over, and I don't know if I want to count on volume from a guy who's tied to a rookie receiver.
But Scott, we did see volume. We saw 9 targets with Drake May going to Pop. You love to see that. He looks like he is the pass catcher. So wide receiver 3 for you, Pop Douglas, Scott.
Yeah, he's the poor man's Wan'Dale Robinson, right? I mean, he's going to get volume. It's not going to be a lot of downfield volume. I thought Drake May's debut was encouraging. It had more good moments than bad. And as a Patriots fan, I get everything I wanted. I felt good about Drake May, and they lost the game. I want them to get the best draft pick possible while still feeling optimistic about Drake May for the future. Unfortunately, with Douglas, because the lack of touchdown equity last week aside, he can never be more than a wide receiver 3/4. He creeps into the wide receiver 3 discussion only because of the teeth of the bye week schedule. But he's still somebody I think is a really good depth add for anybody's roster.
Final one here. Let's just do a little heat check, a little price check on the wide receivers in Green Bay. We have Jaden Reed up there. Romeo Doubs makes an appearance in the ECR. But what about Christian Watson? So ECR has him outside the top 36. Fitz, you've got him at 32. The question I really want to ask you is Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs?
I'd rather have Christian Watson. And I know Doubs is getting the love because of his 2 touchdown performance last week. But I think Watson still is the better player and the more explosive player. It's definitely a boom-bust profile, but maybe he gets a few more targets with Dontavian Wicks, likely out with his shoulder injury. And as far as the boom, we saw the boom last week on his 44-yard touchdown. This is a guy who's 6'4", sub 4.4 speed, and he's tied to Jordan Love. So, yes, please.
All I wanted from Fitz is to just do, I wanted you to become a Costco guy for a minute. I thought you were going to go double chocolate chunk cookie, and you're going to do the boo. I really thought we were about to get that, but apologies.
Well, just remember when you're talking about the Green Bay cookie, they cut into a lot of pieces, right? I mean, Nobody is going to be a target monster there. So unfortunately, these guys have to get in the end zone because nobody's going to get 11, 12, 13 targets off the bus. It's going to be 5 to 8 targets for everybody, but it's a Matt LaFleur cookie. It's a Jordan Love cookie. So we still can't say no to it.
Watson or Doubs for you, Scott?
It has to be Watson. We've just seen a higher at their price points. You're thinking who is the higher theoretical upside, but I don't think either player has a floor right now. And Jaden Reed is probably the right answer here. I still like Tucker Kraft, by the way. I know it was very trendy to bash him last week. He's not that good. They have all these good receivers, and then he has a bad game, and people start victory lapping. I still think Tucker Kraft's a top 10 tight end easily, but give me Watson for more upside over Doubs.
Fitz, could you do a Christian Watson boom for us real quick? We got to get a boom from you. Do it.
Christian Watson, boom.
Boom. All right. Too much. Sorry, everybody.
97.5, the source of rock and roll.
Those guys. Do not forget about our weekly Start and Sit live stream on the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, where you guys can come and ask specific Start and Sit questions. We'll be with you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And for those listening on the podcast, just go to youtube.com/FantasyPros, subscribe, click the bell, and be notified when we have those live streams. Boom.